Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the podcast from Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement in the hobby. I'm your host, Alex Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and tonight I'm joined by Chris MacRae, founder of The Smarter Collector, a platform designed to help you plan projects, track your collection, and make better decisions without juggling spreadsheets. I've been in the beta now. For the last month or so. And I personally have been able to really enjoy the platform, the experience. I've been able to upload my PC. I feel like the UX is super slick and the sandbox view is addictive, but in a good way. And so this episode is all about shortening the learning curve, moving from impulse and FOMO to structure and intention. And I'm really excited to have you join us, Chris. Chris, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Alex.
Of course, man. How's your week going?
So far, so good. My wife and I have a wedding up in New Hampshire at the end of the week, so we're hanging on, trying to rush through everything work-wise and things I'm trying to get out for the Smarter Collector, and then hoping to disconnect for a couple days. But the week's been
Awesome.
good.
That's great to hear. And currently, my Yankees are playing your Red Sox, and we are down 2-1 in what is it, the seventh inning. So we'll sort of be paying attention to that throughout tonight's episode. Okay, so it's the middle of the seventh. Red Sox are up 2-1. They just scored 2 runs in the top of the seventh, and it's looking like the Yankees are going to have to do something here in the final few innings, which has been problematic for us in the past. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Judge can step up. But are you excited for the MLB playoffs to finally be here?
Yeah, I'm a baseball fan at my core, grew up a Red Sox fan, and it's been a couple years, as you probably know, since the Red Sox have been back. It's just unfortunate that the Roman Empire, Roman Anthony, got hurt a couple weeks ago. So maybe if they're able to get hot and make it to the ALCS, he'll be able to join them. But they're a different team with and without him. So I
Yeah,
feel like the Yankees caught a break this year, not having to go up against him. Future Yankee killer, Roman Anthony.
we'll see. We'll see. I mean, the Red Sox definitely do have a really young, impressive core. Obviously, they moved away from Devers earlier this season, but they're really focused on the bright future. Roman Anthony, Marcelo Mayer, Christian Campbell. Obviously, Sedane had a really beautiful moment towards the end of the season to propel them into the playoffs. They have a pretty solid pitching staff. So, Boston sports, always relevant, always staying in contention, even when they're rebuilding. So, something I've had to sort of endure my entire life as a New York fan. But, that's just the way it goes.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
between,
You got 27 World Series to make up for it. It's okay.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I was only alive for a handful of them. Between Boston and Philadelphia, it has been a bit of a nightmare over the last decade or so, especially with the Eagles just winning the Super Bowl. We're in sort of central Jersey now, so we have a little mix of New York fans with Philly fans, but I feel like I've always been around Boston fans my entire life. They find a way to transplant throughout the entire country. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, between the Patriots and the Red Sox, the Celtics, it's always one of those teams. And then of course you have hockey, which I'm not, a big hockey fan, but I feel like, doesn't matter what sport it is, Boston's always finding a way to stay relevant. Anyway, Chris, you and I grew up around the same era or within the same era, the 90s. We have a lot in common. You're a new dad, which is one thing that we don't have in common. I'm not a parent yet, but you've spent a decade in public accounting before moving into sort of strategic finance. I'm curious, how did that path lead to the development of the Smarter Collector?
Yeah. So let's hop back in the time machine to 2017. I'm working in public accounting. And if you're not familiar with public accounting, the hours can get pretty crazy. It was not uncommon for me to be logging 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, even upwards of like 100-hour weeks during busy season. So naturally, you need to find at least a half hour every day to disconnect and think about something besides work. And for a lot of that time, it was like go home and watch a half hour of The Office and then pass out. But there was one night where I saw, it must have been an Instagram post or something on Reddit that was talking about 2017 Topps Clearly Authentic. So I went to Amazon and I said, all right, how much is a box of 2017 Clearly Authentic? And I think at the time it was like 40 or 50 bucks. And I was like, this is so expensive. Like, I'm not going to buy it. And I went to go hit like back to get back to Reddit. This was like 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of busy season. And in doing so, I hit one-click buy on Amazon and didn't think anything went through, just like continued on with my Reddit browsing. Lo and behold, a couple days later, the box shows up on my doorstep, and it's again 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I don't possibly have time to return it, so I was like, I'll just rip it. This seems pretty cool. So I open it up, and inside is a Buster Posey rookie reprint auto. Beautiful image. I think it was one of the first cards on my Instagram profile. My personal account is Cardi C Sports Cards, like Cardi B, but with the C, Cardi C. And from that point, I got back into collecting. I was like, oh, this is really cool. What other cards are out there? And then I went on a journey of personal discovery, trying to figure out what I enjoyed collecting, what sort of lit me up inside. And through that process, I was seeking out community. So I started a YouTube channel, Cardi C Sports Cards. I reached a fair amount of people with that, and like really built a network of friends and trusted collectors that I could find in, bouncing my own collecting strategy off. But when I was creating content for Cardi C Sports Cards, it was never about like what's going to get me the most views. It was really like, how can I take my skills outside of the hobby and bring them to the community. So I did a couple of videos using my background in finance and accounting to analyze the public filings that Topps had at the time, trying to go live, and then breaking down the Fanatics masterclass of like how to screw over another company and like aggressive corporate maneuvering. But I really spent a lot of time thinking about how I could help other people up the learning curve of getting into the hobby, figuring out what you like, figuring what's out there, and figuring out frameworks to accomplish that. So out of that whole Cardi C background, the Smarter Collector was born. Happy to go into more detail there, but I'll pause for any reaction or question.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, we're definitely going to get into the Smarter Collector. So for those listening, definitely stay tuned. The Smarter Collector is an amazing platform. It's incredibly impressive. But what's even more impressive, Chris, is how naturally you've been able to sort of take your background in finance and accounting and apply it directly to the hobby, right? Most people see those skills kind of as corporate or stuck in spreadsheets, but you've really been able to flip them into something that us collectors can use day to day, which is amazing. And, instead of just tracking numbers, you're building a platform that really, I think, helps you think about collections or your collection, other people's collections, in the way a finance professional would think about something like a portfolio, projects, goals, tiers, even fee structures for things like consignment, right? It's like, you took the structure and discipline from your CPA world and translated it into tools that actually make collecting smarter, more organized, and way less overwhelming. And I think something like that it's really rare to see an individual bridge two completely different worlds so cleanly and so smoothly. And I think that's what makes the Smarter Collector so powerful. And so I discovered the Smarter Collector when I started Collectors MD. This was back in March of 2025 this year. And I was looking for inspirational quotes and other brands and voices in the hobby that were sort of speaking about, a lot of what we talk about at Collectors MD, which is collecting with intention, spending responsibly, collecting responsibly, these sort of things. And so I kind of just stumbled across the Smarter Collector, and I saw a lot of the various quotes and phrases and mantras that you post on your social media every single day. And so much of it just resonated, right? It clicked. I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, this is exactly sort of the theme and ideas that we are trying to convey at Collectors MD. And so I was reposting a lot of your social posts, and I reached out, and I know you've been super busy. And then finally we had a chance to connect one-on-one a couple months ago. And I got to meet you and get to know you. And I feel very grateful that, again, I was able to beta test the app and, provide you with some candid feedback of my own. And it's just really amazing to see how much your brand has grown in such a short time. So again, we'll get into the app in a little bit, but I'm just curious, like a few other things sort of pertaining to your personal world. Obviously, becoming a parent recently must have really taken a lot of time in between a full-time job and running the Smarter Collector. I'm curious, this is something we talk about a lot too. How do you sort of allocate all of that, all of your time and all of that energy that you must, expend every single day between those three things? How do you find time to do everything?
Yeah, it's about prioritizing what's important to you. I've made a conscious decision since my son was born last year to really invest my energy into my family and building the Smarter Collector. Um, it's a labor of love. There's plenty of nights where I just want to sit on the TV and binge Band of Brothers or The Office or something. But it's feedback like I've gotten from you, Alex, that has really changed the way that people look at collecting and approach collecting, that really like gives me that energy to get back into building something that is a useful tool for everyone, not just the newcomer. It's the experienced collector, it's a dealer, it's people that are thinking about dealing, it's the flipper, the breaker, trying to provide a different perspective from someone that's been in the hobby that has had successes and has had failures. But if I get super tactical, like how do I decide what I'm doing on a day to day? I don't really get to pick my free time anymore. My son determines that for me. Some nights he will go right to bed and sleep through the night. And I'll be able to work on the Smarter Collector for an hour or two before I have to go to bed. Other times he is not wanting to go to bed, and any plans that I had for the evening get punted until the next day or the weekend or next week. But it's part of being a parent. It's part of being someone that's trying to build something, is you just have to choose the things that are important to you in life and invest fully into those. Now,
Love
I
it.
do need to stop over indexing on the Smarter Collector and get back into like the gym and eating healthy, but that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, yeah. I think in life we get to points where, we just have to make sure that what we're prioritizing, what's important, right? And the whole concept of collecting and the hobby, can become the focal point of our world very, very quickly. And before you know it, things just start to sort of consume you and take over. And so, what I love about the Smarter Collector is that it sort of allows you to take a step back and simplify your approach to collecting. Again, monitor, track your collection visually, digitally, And again, we'll get into that in a bit. I'm being a little overzealous right now, just because I am really excited to talk about it. But I do want to stay on track here. You talk when we spoke, about your story. So obviously you're a '90s kid like me. You mentioned clearly authentic being a nostalgia spark. And then you got back into cards. So what gaps did you see between then and I guess when you re-entered the hobby that you sort of felt like maybe were missing, or things that needed to be fixed?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I need to share a little bit about my own collecting background, and then we can touch on like around the time my son was born, just from a finance perspective, what was going through my head. So I mentioned I ripped open a box of 2017 Clearly Authentic. This was a time in the hobby where you could go to Walmart, you could go to Target, and you could pick up blasters very easily for $20 a pop. So I would buy some boxes and just explore. I would rip them open. I wasn't doing anything with profit intent. I was picking out sets that I liked. I really enjoyed Allen and Ginter and Gypsy Queen. And if you are in tune with the market, there's not a whole lot of resale value in either of those sets, but they have fiercely loyal and rabid followings. So I had sought out to build like a master set of Allen and Ginter just by ripping myself. And then I did something similar for Gypsy Queen. I dabbled with some of the PSA set registries, just trying to find something that really spoke to me. And through all those reps, I figured out that like set collecting wasn't necessarily for me. I liked being what some folks in the hobby are now calling type collecting. I like having a lot of different cards of sets that inspire me, that I think are cool design, that are important in the hobby, and really leaning into that. I don't want to follow just the herd. I want to buy a card that I like. I don't want to build a set and spend my money on a player I don't care about just for the sake of completing the set. So it took me a good 4, 5, maybe even 6 years to figure out what that looked like. I honed in on one PC player, Nomar Garcia Parra. He's my main guy. And then I started a project called the 100-player PC, where I'm trying to collect 3 cards of 100 different players, 25 players from each of the 4 major sports, and use that as like the lifelong framing for my collecting. That'll allow me to buy cards of like Patrick Waugh and Mark McGuire, Tom Brady, and cycle them in and out of my collection to really constantly stay engaged. So you're not just sitting there waiting for that like one Nomar Grail to pop up that hasn't been seen in years. But through that process, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I love that, and I'll touch on it. But what you just illustrated is quite literally what we talk about every day, which is collecting with intention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So I think through that process, what I discovered is there's not a lot out there that help you think through the types of collecting that are available. There's no frameworks. And then if you're picking a player, it's really easy to just get lost in the all-time high sales if you're trying to find what the best card of a collector is. So the Smarter Collector was born out of one, when my son was born, we had more of our discretionary income going towards his childcare. So that meant less money on cards for me. And if I want to stay engaged and involved in the hobby, it's not necessarily going to be through searching and purchasing and selling and flipping. It's really going to be through introspection, enjoying my collection, and researching different card offerings to find what speaks to me. And part of that, like research and introspection, is documenting what I find. So the Smarter Collector was born. The website currently has 2 main sections: collecting guides and player profiles. Player profiles take a player and then they do a deep dive on the cards that are iconic or significant or notable for a particular player. And then I pick 5 of my favorite offerings for that player. And the whole purpose of that is not to tell you what cards to collect. I am conscious and fearful that people may do that. But it is more so to inform people that are looking to do research on, like, here's what the collecting community values and why. And the why is the important part. Is it a notable set? Is it the first time a parallel was introduced? Is there some sort of notability or recognition related to it? And what I'm hoping people have used player profiles to do is like launch off. So if you want to collect Michael Jordan, but you don't know what to collect at your price point, the player profile will cover a bunch of Jordan's iconic cards at price points that are going to check the box off for everyone. Now, Jordan tends to skew more towards the higher end of that spectrum, but that's the goal. That's the intention. So awesome. That's on the player profile side. And then on the collecting guide side, it's really, what are we thinking about as collectors? How can we frame it? What are questions that pop up amongst collectors in the collecting community that I may have an opinion on, or I have information on that I think people will find compelling? So spending time writing and structuring those thoughts and sharing those out.
That's awesome, man. You have a very, very unique way of, or approach, I should say, to collecting. And I find it refreshing. I find it, educational, which is why it's so amazing that you're taking your knowledge and expertise and applying it to a platform where you can help others. So going back to the whole concept of collecting with intention, right? Collecting with intention is just all about keeping the hobby fun and sustainable, right? And so when you slow down and ask why you're adding something to your collection, does it fit your PC? Does it tell a story? Will it still matter 6 months from now? It stops being about chasing hits and starts being about building something more meaningful, right? And that's what makes a collection feel personal instead of just a pile of cardboard. So I love how you've created sort of these filters, something like, I'm only going to collect 3 cards of this particular player, and that's it. And that's something I've had a hard time with in the past, where like I've done the same thing where I'm like, I'm only going to own 3. And my number was 3 also. I'm only going to own up to 3 cards of a particular player. And then, maybe I hit a card where it's like the 4th card of that player, or something comes across my eBay feed and I'm like, I need that. And then suddenly the filters go out the window and we start sort of making excuses or justifying a purchase or saying, it's just like a one-off, but then that one-off can very quickly spiral. And so I think all of this is sort of where the smarter collector comes in, right? You've built the platform to mirror how collectors really think, things like projects and goals and trade-offs and curating down to what actually matters. And it gives collectors the tools to pause, reflect, and just make better choices. And so, it's not just about tracking the numbers. You're really shaping your collection with purpose. And so, again, there's so many synergies between Collectors MD and the smarter collector that I just, we could talk about this stuff for hours. But, when we say collect with intention and not compulsion, I think, again, platforms like the smarter collector really help that shift become a lot easier to put into practice. So we're going to transition over to our next segment, which we're going to cover the platform itself and sort of how it's designed to help collectors actually collect. So just to take a step back, what Chris has built isn't just another database or spreadsheet, right? It's not about logging purchase prices and dates and data and then just letting it sit. It's a platform that mirrors how collectors are actually thinking, how intentional collectors are actually thinking. It's about, again, the projects, the wish lists, the trade-offs, the curation. And when you sit down with your own collection, with your own PC, you're not just tallying the numbers, you're asking yourself questions like, What am I chasing? What am I keeping? What can I let go of? And it sort of allows you to curate, which again, that's a word we use quite a bit. And so the smarter collector builds those exact questions into the UX. And that's why, I think it's just such a leap forward and it's so transcending in today's modern hobby. That's again engineered all around um, volume and the chase and just collecting more and more and more and ripping more and more and more with no end in sight. And so I think that the smarter collector is really built from the perspective of a collector who understands both the emotional side of the hobby and the financial discipline that keeps it sustainable, right? So I'd love for you to give us sort of maybe like a 60-second tour on the app, the Smarter Collector app, and I can pull that up and share it while you sort of explain each of
Sure.
these features, things like the projects, the collection, the want list, the collection stats, things like that. So bear with me. I'm going to pull up the app real quick, and you can dive in.
Sure. Yeah, while you're pulling that up, just a little bit of background on the app itself. I was trying to think about how I can reach more people with the limited amount of time and energy that I have available. And content creation can only scale so much. So I was once again thinking, what are the skills that I have both as a collector and as a professional in accounting and finance that I can deliver? So what Alex is showing here for folks listening on the pod is the collection page of the Smarter Collector platform. It's got all of his cards in his collection that are arranged in a grid format for him to view anywhere. Right now, it's just a web application, hoping to release an iOS app soon, but bumping up against my technical coding capabilities right now. So this is a free app. The collection and financials features are totally free, and they can get you out of spreadsheet purgatory. If you are anything like me, you had your collection, your projects, your consignments, your grading submissions spread across a bunch of different spreadsheets. This is a platform that aggregates all of that activity into one and provides a spot for you to actually look at pictures of your collection. So you can see what's in your collection, and it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Or in my my product market research, I had come across people that were using the Notes app on their iPhone. I think Alex, you had tracked your collection in your photos. Like we need to give something better to collectors there.
Right. And I was using two things. I was using my photos, sort of just like, a personal album, Alex's PC, and I would just drop, screenshots or photos of my cards in there. And then I was also using what was first in Excel and eventually a Google Sheet to track the specific information about the card. So for instance, the player, the type of card or variation, whether it was serial numbered, autographed, short print, etc., the value. And this is sort of how I aggregated my collection. I think a lot of people probably do that, but there wasn't like necessarily a way for me to visualize the collection while also seeing that data. And so this platform just does that in such a unique and seamless way.
Yeah, we have a comment from Alex in the chat saying they have their PC scanned into Collects currently. I assume that's what we're shooting for. Not necessarily. Collects is all, well, my interpretation of Collects is all about value. Like, what is the current value of your cards? Scan it, add it to your collection. We'll pull it from our database and give you some information on the card. I had built this platform to be much more collector centric. So I wanted it to be built for the way that people actually collect. If you have a project, you should be able to create a project and associate cards that belong to that project like directly within the application. Same thing with want lists. Say you're trying to complete the Topps Chrome Gold run of Aaron Judge, and you have 5 of the 8. You should be able to see in one place, I have 5 of the 8 cards in this run, and I'm actively looking for the other 3. I wanted to give you tools to be able to do all of that. Not only that, I, using my background in accounting and finance, have built out a framework or a system that tracks the financials related to your collection. Whether you are a pure collector or you're in this hobby with some sort of profit intent, you need to be able to track what you pay for something, what you sell it for, and anything that will increase the cost basis for those cards, like grading. And not everyone is going to understand the concept of double entry accounting. So what I've done is I've built this application out where every time you record a purchase, it's recorded in the financials as this is your cash outflow related to the purchase. Every time you sell a card, it calculates the profit and loss for that particular sale along with the cash flow. And it really democratizes the access to financial information to people that don't necessarily know how to do that on their own in a Google spreadsheet.
Yeah, Alex is one of our community members. He's in our group chat and joins our meeting on a weekly basis. And a lot of the guys were really intrigued and interested in joining us tonight. So, Alex, thank you for being here and for sharing some of these questions. He's saying here, interesting. That's true by project something like a set. That's cool. I have a Google sheet for the entire 2025 score Charger set. He's a big Chargers guy. Essentially rainbows of all the players, base, inserts, and autos. So yeah, like Chris is saying, and I can't, articulate it obviously as well as he can, but in layman's terms, this is just a really, really great way to visualize your personal collection digitally. And so, you can photograph it and organize it however you see fit. And, in a lot of cases, I think it's really unique where like you have this sandbox tool, right? Where you can do things like power rankings or tier rankings, or compare what you're going to keep versus what you're going to sell versus what's available. And so it allows you to sort of, again, assess your collection in a way that you don't have to take them all out and sort them and lay them out on the bed and do all that. You could do that here. And then once you have an idea of, what you want to keep versus what you want to sell, then you can go into your collection and, pluck the cards accordingly. So there's a lot of really, really awesome features here. I do want to get a little bit into sort of that sandbox feature, Chris. Things like the tiers and the keep versus available and the drag and drop decisions and the export and sharing and all of these things that you can do, which I think are really, really, again, valuable and will help collectors sort of visualize and keep track of everything that they own so that things don't pile up in boxes and then, they lose track of what they're spending. So tell us a little bit about sort of how the sandbox feature is intended to be used.
Yeah. So I built it to simulate how a collector engages with their collection in real life. So picture you have your case in front of you, you dump all your cards on the bed, and you're sorting and arranging. You're trying to find cards that pair well together, or you're trying to decide, do I really like this card? Or there's some creators in the hobby that do phenomenal like collection rankings. Contrarian Cards, I look forward to his collection rankings at the end of the year. Every year he puts so much thought and time and effort into that. So this is just a tool to be able to help you do that digitally.
Right.
The power rankings is like pretty straightforward. You drag and drop your cards into the rankings and you're able to number them. The tier rankings is a similar concept, but you can drag and drop your cards into tiers. What is the S tier? What is at the top of your collection? A tier, B tier, C tier. And that's also like another forcing mechanism to help you evaluate if there are cards that you once loved and enjoyed, but if they're ending up in the C tier, maybe that's an indication that like you should move on. And then the last sort of sandbox that I've built out is the keep versus available. And anytime that I have like a big card come up on my want list that I need to find a way to pay for, it's always a struggle to figure out what cards from my collection I'm going to sell to get there. So this is a live dashboard essentially that you can reference to say, hey, these 10 cards are available if something comes up. I'm not going to have to go through the mental turmoil of figuring out what to collect or what to get rid of if that card does come up.
Right, right. And Alex asks, would there be a way to add a picture of a desired card with an eBay link? So in theory, when budget allows you to go to your wants and click that link, as long as it's not sold, then you're good.
Yep, yeah. So if you actually hit the add card button at the very top and click add to want list, what you can do here is you enter in the information and you can upload a front image of the card and a back image of the card. And that adds the card to your want list. And by adding it to your want list, you're also putting it into the want list tab, which searches all of the active listings on eBay today. So if you have the photo, you can add that in. You just hit add to want list, and then it's on your want list. And
right.
After that's created, you can go into an active project you have and associate cards that are currently in your collection, but also cards that are on your want list. Like, for example, Alex was saying we're both 90s kids. I have an active project in my collection that is like to get the 3 Pokemon cards, Blastoise, Venusaur, and Charizard, either base first edition or just like a base holo set. And if I add it, or if I ever get one of those cards, I can just quickly add that card to my collection through the projects tab. But what I've done is I've put those cards on my want list, associated them to projects, and there's like a gray box over them indicating that they aren't currently in my collection today. So it's good inspiration to like make that gray box not gray anymore.
Right. I'm sort of demonstrating here how to go through this process. Because Alex is a Chargers fan, I just am using Justin Herbert as an example here. So where can I put in that it's, oh, that's weird. When I went back to, oh, now it says I own this card. So can you put those additional details here, like grade, certification number, team, price in the add to want list section?
Yeah, so for the want list, I intentionally stripped out some of those details, but when you add, we'll have to debug that a bit. If you X out of this,
failed to add to cart.
Yeah, if you X out of this and go to the want list tab.
Yep.
And then hit add card to want list.
Yep.
There's some stripped down details here.
Got it.
And if you go down, there's a grade preference. So you can select a grade, or you can use a custom search query. So if you said, I wanted a bunch of different, or I want this card in any grade, you can indicate that there.
Got it. So let's see. No, it's PSA 8 or better.
So if you use if you hit any grade accepted, if you uncheck that, you'll be able to select specific grades here.
Got it. And you can select multiple.
Yep.
Sweet. And then you just click add to want list, and it looks like there's a little bit of it might be the image I'm trying to upload. It might be too, I don't know, pixelated or something, because I just took a screenshot from eBay. But anyway, that's an amazing feature, and obviously a great way to track what you have your eye set on. And again, like in this hobby, there's just so much volume between the releases and what's already come out over the years and different sports and teams. And of course, there are other collectible cards or items beyond just the sports world. We have Disney and Marvel and SpongeBob coming out tomorrow, and all of these other things that have just become so incredibly popular. It can become overwhelming for any collector to sort of decide or figure out what they want to collect. And when that happens, quite often people just go after everything and then decide after the fact what they're going to keep or sell. And when that happens, people lose sight, and they might become emotionally attached to a certain piece that they probably shouldn't have purchased in the first place, or they realize that they don't have the time to grade and list and potentially consign a card. All these things add up, and it can happen very, very quickly. And the whole concept, the whole hobby is engineered now to reel you in and keep you addicted. And so, again, this just does a really good job, I think, of allowing you to stay in control versus the other way around, and continue to collect with intention. So this is really great. Chris, do you want to sort of talk a little bit about the consignment flow, the whole concept of choosing a consigner, the fee previews, the blended fee math, why this matters, et cetera?
So we don't have a consignment flow available at the moment. It's an idea we're batting around.
Got it.
Trying to see if there's value for collectors to be able to consign directly from the platform. But
right, we had talked about that. Okay, so that's on the roadmap, something to potentially look forward to in the future. Okay, so the platform exists on the browser right now, correct? You can't download an app yet. Is there, and I've only used it personally on desktop, how is the sort of mobile usability now versus what you intend for, I guess, in the future?
Yeah, I would say it's passable. I had designed the app, one, to make collecting easier. The bugs we ran into aside, I'll make sure to address those tonight when we get off. But I had created the app knowing that most of the people are going to be accessing this from their phone. So if you have an account, just go to app.thesmartercollector.com and you can test it out on desktop or mobile. There are naturally there are benefits to using the desktop version, including like accessing the sandbox feature. Sandbox only exists on the desktop application right now. It doesn't exist on the mobile view. But in the future, we're hoping to take what we've built here and sort of translate that into an iOS app and Android app, if we have Android users out there.
Very much looking forward to that. Okay, so the launch details, obviously the beta opened a little while ago. It's now officially rolled out. What was the launch date again? Was it September 19th or 20th?
Yeah, it was 2 Fridays ago, September 19th. Yep.
Okay, cool. And so can you tell our listeners and our audience sort of how they can access the app, and sort of what's free, and maybe what you have on the roadmap?
Yeah. So you can sign up for a free account to start uploading your cards today at app.thesmartercollector.com. Just click the sign up button. It's a pretty easy flow. We just ask you to verify your email. The platform is completely free. There is some affiliate revenue that we will receive if you purchase a card that's on the Wantlist, but that is totally not what you need to use the app for if you don't choose to. My vision is to always have a core set of features that are available to collectors for free. The whole thesis is that the core, the nucleus of collecting is your collection. The smallest grain of that is the card itself. but all of your interactions and your transactions are going to happen off of your collection. So we want to be able to like put that in a central spot to make your life easier. There's an opportunity to bring in additional features that make engaging in that easier. Alex had talked about the consignment feature. There's a world where you can click on the cards in your collection and choose a consigner and send that out directly from your collection without needing to go to the consigner's website, create a spreadsheet that compares rates from one consignment shop versus another. And if I'm able to use the platform to get like preferential consignment rates and selling rates, I would love to pass those savings along to the customers versus just having like affiliate revenue come to the platform. Yeah, and I have really high aspirations for the platform and the application, but ultimately the collectors are going to decide if we are at a level of hobby maturity right now that warrants the product market fit to continue investing in this and building it out for the future. So if you like what I'm building, the best thing that you can do is create a collection, use it, provide feedback, ask for the features you want to see, and tell a friend that you're really enjoying it.
Awesome. Chris, congratulations on the app. Really love what you're doing. If you guys want to download the app, I've pinned it up here on the screen. For those listening through audio platforms, you can find the link in the description. It's app.thesmartercollector.com. It's completely free. Chris is doing some incredible things with it, and I'm really excited to see where it goes in the future. So with that, Chris, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is sort of the smarter philosophy. We're calling this from accumulation to intention. And so one thing that I love about what you're doing is that you don't frame collecting just as acquisition. You've said it's a microcosm for self-discovery. And I think that is just so true. The hobby can actually teach things like patience and negotiation and research and critical thinking. These are things that come up all the time in our day to day as hobbyists. And so the challenge is most people enter the hobby thinking it's all about flipping or hitting big or profiting, right? But the irony is that the people who slow down and collect what they love and stick with it for the right reasons, those are the individuals who end up in the healthiest places, both financially and emotionally. So why do you purely buy low, sell high, or sorry, let me rephrase this. Why do you think the sort of buy low, sell high mindsets often backfire?
Yeah, I think a lot of things in life, the best way to be successful is the mundane, consistent showing up. And I think buy low, sell high, it doesn't lend itself well as a mentality to showing up every day and like doing the dirty work. And I don't say doing the dirty work to like to undersell or like demean the hobby whatsoever. But when we are browsing eBay listings and we're building out a want list and we're sort of just like ignoring the hobby noise at large and we're focusing on the stuff that we care about, you're doing that like mundane showing up every day and you're building out a collection that you like over time. And the irony there is that as you're doing that, you are building a collection of cards that other people are going to enjoy as well. They might not capture like the hobby mainstream narrative when you're picking them up, but the chances are like if you thought that a card was compelling enough to add it to your collection and you spent the time researching and coming up with your own thesis for why it fits with your collection, someone else can buy into that thesis. So you take all of those actions and all that time spent, and over time, it's going to like add up and it's going to compound. And you blink, and then you have a 5 or 6 figure collection, and you had no intention of putting a material percentage of your net worth into cards. It just happened because you were buying cards that you liked and you were enjoying them along the way.
Yeah, that's really well said, and I love the way you put this cultivate, curate, collect on your collecting philosophy. Can you speak to this sort of process a little bit?
Yeah, so I think about why the hobby is sticky and like what makes a collector want to stick around for the long term rather than just uh, giving collecting cards a 6 month test and then saying, hey, I want to learn how to golf or I'm going to go play pickleball or something instead. And I think it really comes down to curiosity. Like you have to love the hobby in order to buy fully into it. It's not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. But how can you actually cultivate that love? I think it is through like just learning what's out there and seeing what speaks to you and being intentional about that. Sometimes it's browsing eBay listings, other times it's just speaking with other collectors or going to card shows or card shops and learning more. But there's something that's got to like get you to buy in to want to be here in the hobby in the first place. That goes beyond, hey, I can make a couple of bucks here. From there, you have to figure out what speaks to you. So you take all that learning and then you figure out, how do I actually deploy this? How do I figure out what I want to collect in order to like scratch that itch that has made me love this hobby? So then after you have the list together, maybe it's like a physical list, maybe it's a vibe, you actually go find the cards. You buy them, trade for them, and add it to your collection. And then there's not like an end game to collecting. I don't think true collectors are going to stop when they finish a project or they get to the end of their want list. They're going to find something else. So step 4 is to repeat. And what you'll find is once you get to the end of that journey, your tastes have changed and you've discovered more information along the way. So it loops back to step 1, where you're leaning into more of that research and discovery to further and deepen that love of the hobby. And then you get into figuring out what actually you want to add and then how to collect it. And it's a virtuous cycle for your collection.
Right. I really love this, and I just like the way you break down like collecting into these four very simple, very straightforward steps. And I think through the collector's MD perspective specifically, I think the real key is making sure each of these steps is done with intention, which you obviously convey here, but through the lens of collector's MD. Just to sort of break it down, when you cultivate, it's not just about growing a collection, it's about growing your relationship with the hobby, right? Asking yourself why you're collecting in the first place and making sure it actually adds something positive and valuable to your life. When you curate, that's where a lot of people either thrive or start to spiral. So if you're building a want list, for instance, within a specific budget and an actual plan, you're setting yourself up for long-term joys, but you have to stick to that budget. If you're just chasing whatever's shiny or new or hyped, it usually ends in regret most of the time, especially if we're just mindlessly ripping or joining breaks on a daily basis, just spending stupid amount of money. And when you collect, that's where the intention sort of matters most. It's so easy to get swept up in all of the adrenaline of a big buy or a live break. But if the card fits your story, your PC, your goals, your filters that we were talking about before, that's collecting with purpose. And then, ultimately, when you repeat all this, that's all about refining. Your taste might change, your life might change, and that's totally fine. The healthiest collectors are the ones who evolve with it, and instead of just forcing themselves into a cycle of chasing. And that's why that's really what we're trying to do at Collectors MD also, Chris. It's to help people bring accountability and intention into each of these steps so collecting stays a source of joy instead of stress. So again, there are so many synergies here, and I'm glad that we had an opportunity to sort of dissect that. So getting into my next question for you, you've said it can take sort of 2 to 4 years to figure it out. What patterns do you see in that journey from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's lots of ripping. It's buying cards that you think are cool because someone else has highlighted them. I think it's chasing the wins that you might have had early on. So if you flipped a card for a profit, it could feel like you've mastered your craft, you've mastered the trade, and you can't miss. Uh, Whereas if we're in an environment like we are today, it's actually pretty hard to take a loss with the market moving up the way it is. So all of that being said, like you need to learn some basics that will help you figure out what you like. And part of that is acknowledging that there are a lot of sources of information out there. Some of them are well intentioned and some are not. And even the content creators that aren't necessarily trying to influence you can push you in a direction that like isn't necessarily the best for you. If you're
Right.
overextending yourself or you're buying stuff that you have no intention to keep, then why are you buying it in the first place?
Right.
And those skills are sort of learned traditionally through the school of hard knocks and like having bad experiences along the way. And everything I do is trying to figure out how we can help the new collectors learn those lessons without having to incur like the losses along the way, physical losses, monetary losses, or just like frustration with the hobby.
Right. Real quick, I'm going to pause for a moment. I just realized when the power went out earlier, I think the audio switched from the mic to my headphones. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Is it more clear now?
It sounds very similar.
Okay, good. All right. We'll table that. For those that are just joining us, I had lost power about 5 minutes into tonight's episode, but we were able to get it back up real quick. But technical difficulties, it's 2025. We're still running into all sorts of those. All is good. So I really like the way you put that, Chris. Thank you for that. My next question for you is, how does curating down, sort of reducing the clutter, going back to your philosophy, help increase the joy in your collecting journey?
Yeah, I think it depends on the collector and what you enjoy. Like, would you consider set collecting clutter? Like, it takes up a lot of space, but
Yeah,
if
it's a good
someone
point.
loves flipping through their binders or opening up a box of like 1989 score, like who am I to say that is clutter? So I think it's identifying like what you enjoy and what sort of brings you that escape from everyday life and leaning into that. I think the clutter could be from a mental perspective. If you can't
Bingo.
pay a credit card bill,
Yeah.
If it's taking up space that you don't have and it's not a card that means something to you. If you are thinking about it when you aren't in your like collecting time, if it's creeping into other parts of your life, I think that's how I would define clutter. And by getting rid of that stuff, whether it's selling it or giving it away or not buying it in the first place, it just gives you more time and energy to focus on the cards that you do like and the cards that can provide you that escape from day's challenges.
Yep, you absolutely nailed it. Clutter, we always say it isn't just piles of things that we can see.
Yeah.
It's also the noise we carry in our minds, in our hearts. Physical clutter might be things like stacks of cards or complete card sets or rainbows, whatever, unopened boxes even, or just overflowing shelves. But mental clutter shows up as racing thoughts and constant urges and decision fatigue, never feeling settled because the next purchase or next break is always on your mind, just consuming you. And the other side of that is also the emotional clutter. right? Which is the weight of guilt and shame or the regret that lingers long after a purchase is made or a rush is gone, right? And so when all three of these things, physical clutter, mental clutter, and emotional clutter, build up, the hobby stops being a source of joy and starts feeling like complete chaos. And being able to sort of clear that clutter isn't only about organizing our shelves or our binders or our card boxes or cases. It's about creating mental clarity and emotional breathing room. That way we can collect, or that way collecting can feel purposeful again and not overwhelming. So again, you hit the nail on the head. I just wanted to sort of articulate that again through the lens of Collectors MD, because it's something that just comes up all the time. Awesome. So one last question as part of this segment, then we have two more to go. What signals tell a collector they're moving from impulse to intention from your perspective?
That is an interesting question. I think a signal prior to purchasing is a different type of excitement. Like, you aren't excited at the prospect of a quick win, but you're more excited to pair this card up with another card, or to show it to someone that is not a collector in your family, or like you've identified a personal connection or some sort of non-monetary value that you've ascribed to that card. I think after you purchase the card and it's in hand, the length of time it spends in your collection is a great indicator that, hey, you've actually done this right. And I would encourage everyone to look at the cards that you've bought and think about what you paid and when you bought it, and ask yourself, given the information you know today, would you purchase that card again at that price?
Right.
If we spend a little time thinking that way, it's very illuminating for like how we are as a collector. I tend to like add cards to my want list and then try to get them, and I have like this rush of energy trying to find that card, and I have to stop myself to say, like, hey, how does this card stack up to another card? If I have $500 to spend on a card, this card may be cool, but what's the opportunity cost? What am I giving up in return? And when you start to compare cards across your want list or compare cards across your collection, it can show you like where you really want to go. So if you're going through those exercises naturally, or you're just really connecting with your cards on a deeper level, I think that's what moves you from impulse to intention as a collector.
Really well said. I'm going to pause one more time. The mic didn't switch before, which is probably why you were like, what are you talking about? You sound the same. Now you should hear me a little bit more clearly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it does.
It sounds a little bit more clear now.
Okay. All right. No more talk about the technical difficulties. I do apologize for that. I want to respond to what you just said, because you said it so well. But I also want to congratulate you, because the Boston Red Sox have officially beaten the New York Yankees in Game 1 of the ALWS, the AL Wild Card Series. Or what is actually, it's ALWC. What is? Yeah. Oh, it's Wild Card. Duh. Anyway, congrats. Best of 3. We still have a few more games to hopefully figure it out. But yeah, nice little comeback win for Boston. So again, Chris, you just said that really, really well. And again, I will sort of articulate how we look at collecting with intention, impulse versus intention through the lens of Collectors MD. When you start asking yourself things like, do I really want this, or am I just chasing for the rush? That's a signal you're moving from impulse to intention, right? At Collectors MD, we see this all the time. Impulse feels urgent. It feels like you have to buy right now because the timer's ticking, the auction's ending, the hype is just so loud, the breakers or the live streamers are just screaming at the chat, trying to get you to bid, and you're mindlessly just doom scrolling, and all of a sudden you feel like compelled, oh, this is like a 50% off break, I gotta get in, gonna miss out, again, that FOMO. But intention feels slower, calmer. You pause before actually acting. And another sign, I think, is openness. When you're caught in impulse, there's usually something that's hiding. Deleting confirmation emails, or avoiding conversations with your loved ones, or hiding packages. But intention allows for space for honesty, right? You can talk openly about what you're buying, the reasons why you're buying them in the first place. And you can even invite these people into your process when you're being honest and transparent. And maybe you're making purchasing decisions with your partner instead of on your own, and then trying to justify it after the fact. And then I think, maybe the biggest shift is the feeling afterwards. Impulse usually leaves you feeling anxious or guilty once that high fades, but intention leaves you at peace, even if you just spent money, because this card or this set or this story, this item, whatever it is, actually belongs in your collection or to you. So that's what we're after at Collectors MD, is just helping people notice those signals in real time, so collecting stays about joy and meaning, and not chaos and compulsion. So again, I'm really happy to hear that you and I are absolutely on the same page on that front. And I think you've been doing all of this that we preach about at Collectors MD well before we even started it. And that's why, again, I think the Smarter Collector resonated with me so much, and I just found it so refreshing, because it's a completely different perspective from what we typically see day to day in this hobby culture. And again, there's no right or wrong. We're not saying like this is the only mindset or the only perspective that makes sense. It's really just based on your circumstances and your priorities. And again, if you want to take a step back, regain control of things maybe you lost control of, then we're here to help you. Awesome.
Yeah, so if I could comment on that real quick, I think,
of course,
what you had said applies to people, like every collector. I think those are good guardrails to have, regardless of whether you have a proclivity to like chase that high of a break where you get the big hit, or rip a box and you get the big hit there. I think by following a lot of the information that you say, like, you are not going to have the regret that's going to drive you out of the hobby. And I think if you care about the hobby, if you love the hobby, you should want to see it grow in a healthy way. You don't want to 10x the hobby if it's full of a bunch of like churn and burn people that are in for a month or two, they lose their shirt and then they're gone. You might have some like short-term spikes in values as people are driving the market up, but it's not a healthy place for the hobby, for collectors, or for like the economic impact at large. So I think while your message is directed towards a subset of people in the hobby, I think it's advice that any collector could take.
And I'm really, really glad you said that, because we actually focus on two very distinct lanes. One is complete abstinence, people who just can't collect anymore. They can't have a healthy relationship with collecting or purchasing, or at least on their own, right? And we respect those people. We're here for those people. We empathize with those people. There's also another lane that we call collecting with intention. These are people that are in the hobby and they don't necessarily have addiction or have any issues financially, mentally, or emotionally, but they just want to stay in control before things start to slip, right? Because the direction that this hobby is headed in, with these conglomerates and the gambling mechanics that have been layered into each of these platforms, there's really no telling what this environment is going to look like in 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And we just want to make sure that we are staying in the driver's seat, right? Yeah. Not letting, forget about, all of the sort of external pressures, but our own internal subconscious or devil on our shoulder or impulses start to take the wheel, because that's what we're seeing, again, more and more of. So I appreciate that. Also, one other caveat, one other note here. this doesn't just apply to card collecting. This applies to all collecting. Obviously, we see more of the gambling mechanics with the break culture, but we have people in our weekly meetings who collect other things than cards. There's the sneaker culture. There's the NFTs and the digital gaming with the loot boxes and the gotcha games and all that sorts of stuff, right? And you have luxury items like watches and handbags. Obviously, collectibles is massive. So, or sorry, not collectibles, memorabilia is massive. So there are a number of different verticals that all of this philosophy and thinking applies to. And even just overspending in general, retail therapy, whatever you want to call it. You know, people chase that dopamine high of looking forward to getting a package in the mail, whether that be ordering an item on Amazon or, you know, a retail website for a clothing item or something. Even going to the grocery store, like people need that dopamine spike, right? And so it's all about, again, just taking a step back, reevaluating why you're spending in the first place, making sure that it doesn't take control of your psyche, your mental, your emotional capacity, making sure that it doesn't negatively impact those around you, and just, you know, making sure that you're on the straight and narrow. So again, appreciate your insight there, Chris. Super valuable. So we're going to get over to the next segment, which is the funnel problem and industry incentives. And so here's where things, I think, start to get a little bit tricky, right? Right now, the funnel into the hobby is completely dominated by the breaks and the repacks and the big corporate marketing from Fanatics and whatnot, and even Panini, as they are, you know, quietly starting to take a step away with losing their license or licenses. And I do still think Panini is going to be involved. They're just going to continue to pump out the product without the license. But especially in the last month or so, where they've just been pumping out product after product after product, it's so incredibly overwhelming. And so for most new collectors, that's their very first experience, seeing all of that sort of take place around them in their social media world, right? They're essentially taught that gambling mechanics they're taught those gambling mechanics. They're taught that gambling is okay before they're actually taught collecting. And the issue here is the incentives just aren't aligned, right? Platforms and breakers make money whether or not collectors are burning out. They don't care. That there's no real pause button. And if it takes, 2 to 4 years for someone to figure it out, that's thousands of dollars that's potentially gone or more. And not just the money, again, the financial and emotional burnout that comes with it. The mental and emotional burnout that comes with it. And in many cases, the collector themselves is just gone before they even get there, right? And so I'm curious, what concerns you about this current sort of top of funnel that we're seeing in the hobby environment right now?
Yeah, I think my concern comes for the person that just wants to collect. They want to carve a niche out for themselves that might be like the world's best collector, but they never get the chance to do so because they're brought down a path that will turn them out of the hobby before they even have a chance to build a collection. Right. I think another thing people talk about is this idea of a 25-year nostalgia cycle. I don't know that we are laying the foundation today to create a nostalgia cycle 25 years from now. If kids in the hobby aren't collecting and trading in binders with their friends, but they got Pelican cases with 5 figures worth of cards in it, and the only reason they're here is for flipping challenges and trying to learn entrepreneurial skills. It's fine to teach kids how to do some of that stuff, but it's not collecting, and it's not something that's going to build that nostalgia 25 years from now. Last point I would make here is that the mainstream media coverage is overwhelmingly focused on cost or price. And even when I interact with friends and family that aren't collectors and I show them a cool card, I want to talk to them about the story of the card, the player, and the significance of the card. but their question is always, oh, that's really cool. How much is it worth? And to me, like the how much is it worth is secondary to all of the other stuff. So I think those 3 points, not to mention everything you had mentioned about the manufacturers and the breaking culture and incentivizing gambling, it just creates for like a lot of unhealthy entrance to the hobby as it relates to like actual collecting. If you want to come in to speculate on sports cards, like you can do that. They're just come into it with eyes wide open that like you're speculating on sports cards, and it's another form of gambling. Um, it's not what we have traditionally referred to as collecting, where you fill a binder up with Pokemon cards, or you fill a spare bedroom up with Beanie Babies or something that you can actually like interact with, engage with, and enjoy.
Right. Really well said, Chris. There's 2 things I want to share here because you brought up a really good point, and that's mainstream media just completely stealing the narrative, right? And so we have things like this, right? Kevin O'Leary, really well known and well liked personality, obviously famous because of Shark Tank, also because he's, I guess, a multi-billionaire. And so the problem with mainstream voices like Kevin O'Leary, who's been very active in the hobby community over the last couple months, people like Kevin weighing in on the hobby, is that they only look at it through the financial lens, right? To them, or to Kevin, cards are just another asset class. Stocks, crypto, collectibles, it's all the same thing at the end of the day. If it's making him money, it's attractive to him. That might make for like flashy headlines and, you know, TV sound bites and TikToks and reels, but it completely ignores the human side of the hobby, right? When the narrative is only about the return on investment, it just creates this pressure for collectors to treat every single purchase like it's an investment. And that pressure, I think, just fuels the compulsion, the fear of missing out, the rush to buy before a spike, the belief you're falling behind if you're not flipping constantly. Suddenly, the joy of collecting is just replaced by all this anxiety and the debt and the burnout. And so at Collectors MD, we see every day how dangerous that mindset can be. People who come in because they love the game, the players, the history, they just end up finding themselves in a cycle of gambling-like behavior because the loudest voices told them it was just a business. It was just an investment opportunity. But let's take a step back here. This isn't Wall Street, right? Like, it's a hobby, a childhood hobby, like rooted in nostalgia. And it should be fun. It should be fulfilling. It should be sustainable. And so that's why, you know, we, I think, need to push back on the purely financial framing. Cards can have value, and that's great. That's fantastic. If you can collect and, you know, have a tangible asset or an heirloom piece that you can pass down to your kid one day, that's amazing. But if we're solely focused on that without intention, that's when I think the hobby starts to become toxic. And I just think collectors deserve to hear more than just dollar signs. They deserve conversations about balance, accountability, and what it means to collect in a healthy way. So I wanted to showcase that because obviously this has been all over the news. And for those
can
of you who,
can I chime in with a couple thoughts on this? I think,
yeah, of course,
this is the perfect example of a card story or a card purchase getting an outsized percentage of like hobby eyeballs as it relates to like actual collectors. What's going on at the top end of the market is really impacting an infinitesimally small number of collectors, but because it's the most anyone's ever paid with a card, you have like CNBC and Fox Business News and all these non-hobby outlets picking up the story. And if you start listening to what Kevin O'Leary says, it's like very apparent that it is meant to establish a foundation for the like tippity top of sports cards as a like pure alternative asset category in order to get other high net worth investors in to place their money on sports cards. The reality is, like, many of us are never going to sniff a card that approaches this scale. We shouldn't be concerned with what Kevin O'Leary is doing. There are like 0.5% of people that play in that space that should be concerned and be worried about their intentions and the whole price fixing of it all by forming a buyer group with the explicit purposes of not bidding each other up, which is a totally separate issue. But I think it's a perfect example of how like the narrative is so focused on something that affects like almost none of the hobby, but because it has an outsized level of coverage, it feels way more important than it actually does to the majority of people. So my advice is like take this with a grain of salt, observe what they're doing, and look at it critically. They're building an index full of cards that you cannot easily price, and they're putting their own price on it to inflate the value of what is effectively like an alternative asset card portfolio that they're going to try and sell down the line.
Right.
I think it doesn't matter for the vast majority of people in your audience and my audience and the people that I want to try and help build a collection on a budget of $50 a month to $500 a month.
Right. Well said, Chris. I think we live in a day and age now where so many people are just consumed by headlines and short bite-sized content. And so when they see something like this, they immediately think, oh, wow, if Kevin Leary's getting involved, then this must be, a great opportunity or something I should get involved in. And so, we're not necessarily saying that this is a bad thing for the hobby. It obviously gives the hobby a national spotlight within mainstream media, which I think is a good thing in a lot of ways. But I also think that this could potentially confuse people. And again, to your point, you have to take this information with a grain of salt, because the mass majority of people are never in their entire lifetime going to be in an opportunity where they could purchase a $13 million card. And to your point, yes, this is just like an additional asset class that Kevin O'Leary is involved in. His intention here is to turn this into an index alongside Shine, who I actually have a relationship with. And by the way, Shine is a great guy. He really wants the best for the hobby and, looks out for the betterment of the industry, which I think is really great. But he just plays in a completely different space along with people like Kevin O'Leary. And we just can't compete with those people. It's a different type of collector. It's a different type of hobby altogether, right? And so, again, their intention is to profit off this in the future. I know that they want to showcase a lot of these pieces in a museum of some sort. So it's very, I think, buzzworthy and something they're looking to capture a lot of attention with and create buzz around the hobby. But at the end of the day, like you said, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because it's just a completely different realm than that we exist in. So don't see this and just, listen to the breakers talking about how, well, if Kevin O'Leary's investing, then you got to buy. Take a step back, look at your own circumstances through your own lens, and make sure that you're making intentional decisions that are smart, that are healthy, and that benefit you and your family and your loved ones, because that's what's most important. So with that, there was one other thing that I wanted to show here, and that was something that popped up on my newsfeed today, that popped up on my Instagram feed today, that really caught my attention. And I ended up posting about it on Instagram. And just bear with me one sec to pull that up. But it touches on this whole concept of the hobby, the conglomerates, the industry, just sort of taking the driver's seat and only focusing on revenue and just pushing this content down the throats of the consumer. So, of course, how to promote our episode tonight. So there was this. I don't know if you saw this. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I apologize. So I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but Fanatics Collect posted this story on Facebook and Instagram yesterday where this 14-year-old kid, thought it would be cool to take his Blaine's Charizard, which is apparently like a $3,000 card in a PSA or CGC 10, and he basically pressed it into his skateboard somehow. And he realized years later that this was a valuable card, and he, it garnered attention. And so what Fanatics Collect said here was when he was 14, this kid thought it would be cool to press his favorite Pokemon card into his skateboard grip tape, a first edition Blaine's Charizard. Years later, he dug the board out and realized what he'd done. That same card, in pristine condition, now regularly sells for over $3,000. Just a few months ago, a CGC 10 copy went for, what does that say, $34.80 on Fanatics Collect, of course, self-promoting there. One childhood decision revealed forever or sealed forever in grip tape turned out to be, and this is the part I have a problem with, a $3,000 mistake. So this is what I posted today. Calling this a $3,000 mistake, in my opinion, is despicable and just pure clickbait, right? It's designed to sensationalize and chase engagement instead of respecting the real spirit behind a childhood story. This is what a lot of people like to call rage bait. It reduces a kid's innocent act of passion and creativity into nothing more than a lost profit calculation. And then I went on to say, shaking my head here because this is just like, the epitome of everything that we're seeing unravel. The hobby is supposed to be about joy, nostalgia, and personal meaning, not treating every card like a stock to be speculated on. And so by framing a story like this only as a financial blunder, Fanatics is unapologetically reinforcing the toxic culture that turns collecting into gambling and exploitation, rather than celebrating what makes collecting something like Pokemon cards magical for children in the first place. And I was able to, find some comments that, shared very similar sentiments. So Sports Card Dad here, who was pretty well known in the YouTube community, he said, I would argue that was not a mistake at all. It's a really cool story that you hold on to forever. And then even a few more people on Facebook said things like, it's a hobby. True collecting isn't about money. Bro thought it'd be dope to put a card on his board. That's priceless. Somebody else said, nah, that's just a childhood experience. I bet he felt like the coolest kid around with the card in his board, and rightfully so. We can say that about many things from our childhood, but the memories they brought is what's important. Everything revolves around money. Even kids nowadays don't have regular kid childhoods because they also chase things for money. We're doomed. And then lastly, the card went with him on adventures, true to the Pokemon story. I thought that was cute. So anyway, the point here, again, is that we have an industry leader like Fanatics, right? They are basically a monopoly at this point because they're taking over the licenses for all of the major sports. They're turning this hobby that we know and love into, a money machine, a revenue machine. It's all based around gambling mechanics, and we're stripping the very joy that brought us here in the first place as children. And that's the part that deeply disturbs me and that I think we need to bring to light. And this is not, an attempt to call out Fanatics or get them upset or chances are they won't even see this, although they do see a handful of my stories when I tag them. But again, the major difference here versus where what we see in other industries like the stock market, crypto, sports betting, etc., is that the hobby has this component of childhood nostalgia. And again, when industry leaders are exploiting that for their benefit, that's when I think there's a problem. So I'm curious, Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the example you shared is just like a microcosm of what is going on. And I think instead of this is going to come out wrong, but instead of harping on what has been done wrong, we have to think about how to build things better. And the reality is, Fanatics is putting that content out there because it gets clicks and it gets engagement. Sports Card Investor follows a very similar mentality and sentiment. He's got 200 something thousand followers on YouTube
Right.
with like a very similar messaging. I challenge the hobby to find a way to take the comments that like you had shared and create as equally compelling and click worthy content. And I think if you care about this and you're a collector, the best thing that you can do is one, make that content, but two, engage with that content when you see it. Because if we as people that care about the hobby aren't going to engage with it, people that don't care about the hobby, that don't care, frankly, that a kid had a card on a skateboard that was worth a lot of money someday, like they're not going to engage with that. So I think like that would be my reaction is how can we as a hobby community build what we want to see and engage that and sort of force that into the narrative so that the $3,000 mistake isn't the thing that gets the clicks. It's like this kid was super creative and figured out a way to take his favorite Pokemon card and make it front and center on a skateboard that he used every day.
Right.
And maybe it's like we need to reinvest into storytelling and figuring out how to capture people's patience and attention. I don't know. I think that is the core issue in the hobby today is figuring out how to capture the journey of a collector and that playfulness and that spirit and like succinctly convey it in a way that is the same as this card is worth $500. And I don't know how to do it. No one's mastered it yet. And if you have seen anyone that has done that before, please send their information my way because I would love to consume their content.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, we have to draw more attention to the storytelling. I think that's what it's all about. We've lost sight of what brought us here in the first place as a community, as a collective. And when we're just focused on the dollar signs and the attention in the live chats or getting tagged by our favorite breaker in today's top 10 hits because you were one of them, we lose sight of what is important, right? This isn't a popularity contest. And I think a lot of people look at it that way, unfortunately. So I appreciate your thoughts there. I totally agree. So getting back on track to this segment, which again is the funnel problem and industry initiatives, where do you see sort of misaligned incentives at a high level, and how can tools and education sort of rebalance things? That's something I think you just touched on a little bit, but can you expand a little bit more on what you have in mind as far as tools and education?
Yeah, so the question is, how is the industry misaligned today, right?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, so I think from an auction house perspective, the fact that fees are based on the final hammer price for a card creates the incentive for them to get as many high value cards on their platform as possible. Even though they're roughly providing the same level of service for every card that enters a weekly auction or a premier auction, absent some of like the marketing efforts that go behind the really, really big cards that you see. So I think that's number one. Number two is the manufacturers only get to participate in the initial box sale. So they are incentivized to sell as many boxes as they can because they are not able to capture the secondary profits that are gobbled up by dealers and graders and anyone else that touches the hobby ecosystem. As a result, that means that they want to create as many parallels as possible and in as many configurations as they can to saturate the market and increase their profits while reducing the amount of cost that goes into creating each of those boxes. You get lower implied value when that happens, and it's just worse off for the people that are breaking it all together. I think the way to solve some of these problems from a like big company perspective is like, unfortunately, through regulation. I think you have to look at the way that boxes are being configured and who they're going to and how they're getting distributed, and try to have some sort of fairness involved there when there are serious financial implications on the line. I don't know on the auction house perspective if there's ever going to be a significant change in like the fee structure, but figuring out like flat fee or tier-based fees instead of a percentage fee would make it like a much more equitable experience for collectors. I think educating collectors on like the realities that this is what we face from a macro perspective empowers them to find different lanes of collecting that information or that situation doesn't apply. Maybe that's collecting vintage or collecting cards from the 90s or early 2000s rather than recently opened products. Or maybe it's purchasing cards through avenues like Instagram or Facebook or trusted auction platforms that you actually want to support with your dollars, or going to card shows and collecting with people. It's really easy to just like go to a game and see the Fanatics ads everywhere and be inclined to buy a blaster or buy a hobby box somewhere and rip, right, because that's all you know. But underlying that hobby box is like tens of millions of dollars in this hobby ecosystem that has set it up that way to like work against the collector. The collector is the sheep right now that is like getting screwed over while everyone else is making gobs and gobs of money.
Right. Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about regulation and guardrails through the last 6-7 months of Collectors MD, and it's definitely a gray area. It's definitely a really, really scary concept for a higher power or a government-like body, think the SEC or a gaming commission, to come in and start laying down the law. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see a lot of these platforms, companies, manufacturers, breakers, card shops, all the way down to the LCS, start to adapt to a lot of these changes, a lot of the reform that we talk about before. We want them to adapt proactively before something like that happens. And I agree. I mean, I think it might take something like regulation to finally turn this hobby in the right direction from a ethical standpoint. But, is there a way? Is there a lane where it can happen without having to get to that point? I don't know. And that, a part of what we are doing at Collectors MD is to help sort of, filter a lot of what's going on in the hobby in this direction, to educate people, to provide tools and resources for those that need it. We have a hobby reform initiative that basically speaks to, an outline, all of the things that would be necessary in order to get the hobby, back on track. Again, from an ethical standpoint, but, we need more folks involved. We need more awareness being spread across the entire industry. We need more accountability from the breakers, from the manufacturers, from the platforms. And we need less of, the rage bait headlines and, the sense of urgency that these breakers are just forcing down our throats 24/7. I think Whatnot needs to really step up and make some changes within their platform. I think that a lot of these platforms need to reinvent what a repack is and how it's introduced to the consumer. So anyway, we can sort of talk about that, flesh that out for days. But again, I want to keep us on track. All right. So if you could flip one lever to reduce burnout, right? We talked about financial, emotional, and mental burnout. What would it be? Would it be, the product design? Would it be more disclosures? Would it be more education, the tools, resources, the shop practices? We covered a lot of that, but what do you think is sort of the most important of all of those?
I think of my brother who has gotten back into collecting recently, and he is a huge sports fan, but he doesn't want to collect anything from baseball, hockey, football, basketball because the options are too overwhelming. So he's actually collecting women's tennis cards because the product offering is like so much smaller. He can actually use the limited time he has to spend in the hobby to really learn about the product. If there was a switch to flip where you open up a checklist and everything goes gray except the cards that would speak to you, I think that would be amazing to like narrow the focus in on what a collector would enjoy and enable them to like double click and do some research into those cards. Because right now people will open up the checklist and they'll be so overwhelmed that they'll just close the checklist and walk away. Or they get into a break without fully understanding the product configuration, the parallels, and if that break is setting them up to win or fail.
Interesting thought perspective there. Yeah, I mean, that's another good point. There are a lot of very sort of verticals that are off the beaten path within the hobby. Sort of categories within categories, subsets, subcategories, things like, women's tennis, or I don't know. I think Marvel and Disney and SpongeBob, again, dropping tomorrow, has sort of burst onto the scene as mainstream at this point. But there are other things that you can collect that aren't necessarily in your face 24/7, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just cards. So I do like that thought, those ideas. Okay, so let's transition over to our final segment, which is sort of where we put our ideas together, right? We have Collectors MD, we have the Smarter Collector, both doing very different things, but I think through, the same morals and values, which I think we share a lot of the same of. So what excites me most about this conversation is, again, how aligned our work is. And so you're building, the structured toolkit that's, financially sound and visually intuitive. And at Collectors MD, we're building the mental health side, things like peer support and responsible messaging and recovery resources. But I think those two together, can create something very powerful. And that's a system that not only helps collectors manage their collections better, but also keeps them grounded emotionally and financially. And so I think that's really the sweet spot here. So, something like in-app nudges. This is what we're actively looking to explore across the entire landscape of the hobby, which is partnering with breakers and card shops to implement responsible ripping messaging into their ecosystems. Something like, hashtag collect with intention, hashtag rip responsibly. This is something that I feel like would be a great feature, where if someone logs a big spend on the Smarter Collector app, they see a gentle nudge, something like, hashtag collect with intention, something like a co-branded guide, how to collect with purpose and peace of mind. I'd love to collaborate with you on one of these guides. I think, the framework and these exercises that you come up with are just really incredible. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, if you go to the Smarter Collector website, and I'll just bring it up one more time. Bear with me. You go to resources and then collecting guides. Here you'll find all of these different guides and articles that Chris has published around buying, selling, tracking, and they're all just really, really intuitive and sort of easy to follow. And again, just sort of lends his expertise and knowledge in this space in helping other people sort of collect with intention, which I love. And again, what I'd love to do is like create something that's co-branded, something that drives the message home from sort of both sides of the fence, right? And so embedding responsible prompts in things like shops and streams are really important. But how do you feel about, let's just say hypothetically, we were to start implementing the framework of responsible ripping across apps like the Smarter Collector or maybe Card Ladder, who we recently signed an affiliate deal with. Do you think that's something that would be beneficial to the hobby? Do you think it's something that might be distracting, confusing? What do you see as like the best way to sort of streamline a lot of this really important messaging into the overall hobby experience?
Yeah, I think those are great ideas. Ultimately, you have to get before someone is pulling the trigger or hitting like the buy button. And I think the like soft nudges prior to checkout would be the most powerful thing. But if you can normalize the distribution of that messaging, so it's not feeling aggressive or confrontational when it happens, I think that would help people that are struggling with over purchasing, overextending themselves. And I think the people that are doing it responsibly, if they get that nudge or they're seeing that messaging, it just helps reinforce that they're on the right path, that they are collecting with intention, they are buying something that they are not going to regret when that mail day comes in.
Awesome. We're really grateful because there have been a handful of breakers and card shops that we've been speaking with. First and foremost, Cards HQ, which is Jeff Wilson's company. I was on his show last month, and he, basically said, like, at Cards HQ, we want to look out for our customers, and this all makes sense. So let's start integrating this messaging into our ecosystem. And so that's something I'm working with Jeff and his team on building out. We're also working with stand-up displays to create things like, again, rip responsibly messaging and collect with intention, card stands, so that it can be subtly layered into these environments. So this is something that I had, presented to you as an idea, potentially collaborate or integrate our messaging into your ecosystem in some capacity. And I know you're growing and you just launched the app, so there's a lot going on, and we don't want to sort of overwhelm the user experience, but I do want to invite you to explore that conversation in the future. Obviously, no pressure. I think it's something that, again, both of us just see eye to eye as it pertains to the responsibility and accountability that needs to come with collecting and with being industry leaders in the space. And so, again, it's an open-ended invite to collaborate in the future on some of the things that we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
So awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or any other thoughts before we shift over to our rapid fire round?
Now let's do the rapid fire. Let's go for it.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask you a question. Give me the first couple words, first sentence that comes to mind. Don't even think about it. Just give me first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Favorite card in your PC right now?
1999 Star Rubies Nomar Garcia Parra Spring Fling.
Love it. One set you recommend for new intention-driven collectors?
1997 Pinnacle, totally certified. The platinum parallels are amazing. I think the platinum blues are out of 1,099. So it's a nice accessible price point for people that are just getting in.
Awesome. A tool or template every collector should use?
Smarter Collector platform.
Boom. Card you still think about selling and why?
Not too many. I guess if I had to pick one, I'm going to actually pick two. I sold a 2001 SP Authentic Ichiro and Pool Host. I sold the Pool Host to actually fund launching the Smarter Collector. And then because I didn't have the Pool Host, the Ichiro felt orphaned. So I hope to add them both back to my collection one day, but they were the right decisions for me at the time.
Well said. And, for those listening, I couldn't agree more. You don't need every single piece in your collection. Cards come and go. You can always buy them again. Don't feel like, emotionally attached or, there will be some sort of fallout if you part ways with a particular piece in your collection. They're just cards at the end of the day. You have to look out for what matters most. You have to make sure that you're prioritizing the things that are most important. So, just wanted to add that in there. One habit that made you a smarter collector overnight.
I guess it's not overnight, but picking a player to study their market and like habitually checking recent sales of that player to learn their market, learn the significant cards, and that sort of like makes you closer to an expert in that particular category. So a little bit of a cop out, but that would be my answer.
Awesome. And then last question, one thing that you'd like to see from a, I guess, responsible ripping perspective, change in the industry within the next, let's call it by end of year.
I don't know, box limits or purchase limits for individuals with a single breaker if you're a breaker over a certain level. I haven't thought too much about that, but that was the first thing that came to mind.
That's totally fair. All right, Chris. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Your perspective on intentional collecting, the psychology behind the hobby, and the tools that collectors need to stay grounded have just been really, really valuable. I think our audience is going to find a lot of value in this conversation. For everyone listening, you can find Chris and the Smarter Collector at the Smarter Collector. That's the Smarter Collector, all one word, on Instagram. And you can check out the Smarter Collector platform, which launched officially on September 19th. And you can check out and see how it's helping collectors just rethink the way they engage with the hobby. And as always, if you or someone you know is struggling with compulsion or burnout, we invite you to join our Collectors MD peer support group. We meet weekly every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's free, it's confidential, and it's open to anyone who needs a safe space to share and get support. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Collector's Compass. Remember, collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.